discussion. Representative Bonham.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Question to the carrier, Carrier Nathanson.
Question to the carrier, co-carrier Nathanson. Do you agree to a question? She does. Please continue.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Co-carrier Nathanson, in your opening, you suggested that the commercial activity tax was progressive. From everything I've read and now understand, Oregon's working families would pay more for many household purchases. So I was curious if you could please explain how you view this tax as progressive.
I believe that this proposal is progressive because of the various components of the proposal. The way the tax is structured, first of all, we favor small businesses. Roughly 90% of Oregon's businesses won't be paying this tax. Businesses' receipts under $1 million are not subject to this tax. So that's one way. Another way is because individuals have been paying an increasingly larger share of income taxes going to the general fund. For example, individuals have been paying roughly 85% of the income tax headed to the general fund, and businesses have been paying roughly 15%. And we have provided for personal income tax relief for Oregonians. And that relief applies to the income that's calculated on the bottom 3 of 4 different bands, rate bands. And so the relief happens at the lower parts of the income level, so that finally at the top of the rate there is not an income tax rate reduction, but the rate reduction applies to income below that rate.
Representative, additional question?
No, to the bill, Madam
To the bill.
Madam Speaker, House Bill 3427 is unaffordable, it's ineffective, and it lacks transparency. If there's one theme to this 2019 legislative session, it's unaffordability. The major topics in the Capitol thus far: a $1.6 billion paid family and medical leave program, a $1.2 billion cap and trade program, or a carbon tax system, a PERS fix package that includes theft of the kicker, rating safes reserves, and ask current PERS employees to direct contributions to a stability fund. So all those employees, I hope you know that you're being asked to contribute to a fund that in most cases is a benefit you won't qualify to receive. A $500 million employer tax assessment, and a $350 million Medicaid tax, and finally, a $2 billion commercial activity tax. I was elected because I wanted to change things for the better, to help improve the lives of those who live in House District 59. A huge part of that plan is making life more affordable, providing opportunities to pursue the American dream, and allowing for upward mobility. There are elements of this legislation that I absolutely love. I'm so encouraged by the funding that will seed and help expand early child development, an investment that will yield significant returns in the future. It brings additional funding to CTE and STEM programs. And yet at the end of the day, with respect to this bill, I believe there's a better way. If we're going to have this conversation, it's imperative that we discuss PERS reform at the same time. It's not a chicken and an egg. It's not a cart and a horse conversation. These negotiations are inherently linked. The results of House Bill 3427 is threefold. One, it's a sales tax on essentials, making life less affordable. Let's talk about an Oregon family. $671 will be their expense under this bill. Working families face an increased cost of housing, utilities, clothing, hot coffee, restaurant food and takeout, cell phones, diapers, bicycles, cars and trucks, pizza delivery, beer and wine, toilet paper, medication, and even birth control. You may ask, but if this is a commercial activity tax that's paid by corporations, how does it affect working families' cost of living? Because at the end of the day, no tax on business is not going to raise prices. Problem number 2, special interest loopholes for wealthy campaign donors. There are massive corporations with the preponderance of their sales taking place outside of Oregon. Combined with their ability to deduct 35% of payroll or their cost of goods inputs, this will leave them essentially exempt from this tax. I find it absolutely appalling that a corporation who effectively negotiated their way out of this tax is now contributing funds into a political action campaign to defend it potentially at the ballot. And I believe the majority party is complicit with this activity. Another big winner are the wealthy trial lawyers, as this bill exempts damages received as the result of litigation. Again, there's a better way. And if this is the right way, why not send this bill back to committee and remove all the special interest carve-outs? The final problem is where this funding lands. The funding will not help achieve current education goals. This conversation started out about funding the QEM. This bill doesn't do it.
Excuse me, Representative. Representative Hovey, for what purpose are you in the privilege queue?
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I am concerned that the Speaker is impugning members of this body by saying that we're complicit with some sort of activity that is not true.
Thank you, Representative. Representative, I would caution you to be careful about making any insinuations, but please continue. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. By adding programs and not simply driving funds into the system, future QEM models will need to increase and take into account those additional program mandates that are built into this legislation. This bill also has the potential to be utilized to simply offset the rising cost of PERS. As voters have experienced from previous mandated funding from ballot measures, for example, with ballot measure 96 that specified funding for veterans programs, the legislature can simply steal from the general fund allocation to a program and backfill with a new tax stream, essentially denying the will of the voters. I'm also concerned about the long-term economic impact of the commercial activity tax and how it stacks on already unfriendly business policy in the state of Oregon. We budget for over $800 million in economic development spending. I would submit to this group that better business policy and predictable and equitable deployment of taxes could lead to increased economic prosperity and a broadened tax base that would reduce the burden on all Oregonians.
One moment, Representative. Representative Post yields his time. Please continue.
Thank you, Representative. My economic development district back home wrote to me and said, the 2019 legislature seems resolved to pass some of the most sweeping and damaging bills to Oregon's business climate that I've witnessed in over 26 years of doing economic development. They go on to say, and I'm paraphrasing, this is the exact tax we did not want. This bill fails to provide any reduction in spending and provides no path forward to reduce the impact PERS has on the classroom and the state. Are we setting the state up for a world of hurt when the next recession comes? If there are less taxable entities when the economy constricts, the cost of living burden on working families will be overwhelming. I look back to my senior year in high school, and I absolutely value my public education. Some of the best years of my life, some of the most wonderful people that taught me and engaged with me. And my favorite class in all those years, I sat in Joe Calpin's government class my senior year. And the first assignment that we had, the first major assignment we had, was write an essay in which you spell out your political affiliation and your ideology. I wrote that essay, and I self-identified as a Christian conservative Republican, who wanted to increase spending on education. And I remember Joe Kalpin said, I'm going to mark you down for this kid because, Republicans don't like spending money on education. I beg to differ, Mr. Kalpin, and I still do. I could write that paper today and I would probably describe myself 23 years later. Oh, God, it was longer ago than I realized. But I've learned over the years, to be more flexible in my thought, to consider not just other perspectives, but to even question my own thoughts. And the one thing that I've never come full circle on to question or to modify my thought process is the role of public education and the funding thereof. I still think that this is something we should endeavor to fund at a level that provides adequate and reasonable growth for teacher pay, for classroom size, for all the things that we want to achieve. And I believe that we can do it, and it's a matter of priorities. My big concern is that this tax is the wrong avenue to get there. I guess what I want more than anything, if I could be king for a day, bring a bill to the floor that fully funds education. Bring a bill to the floor that requires us to fund schools first. Bring it today, a bill that requires us to fund schools at $10.7 billion, and I'll vote yes. I would be an absolute yes. My concern is this tax. My concern is the methodology and the future opportunity to ratchet that tax up and to continue to harm the economy and make cost of living for Oregonians more expensive here in the state of Oregon. I'm going to leave you with one final thought. John F. Kennedy said, "Let us not seek the Republican answer or the Democrat answer, but the right answer. Let us not seek to fix the blame for the past. Let us accept our own responsibility for the future." Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Thank you, Representative. Further discussion?